Hello, how are you? It's time for another video on the runes. And this time we're beginning the second set of 8 runes, the second eight. Every one of the runes are divided into 3 parts, the three eighths, because there's 24 runes in the older Futhark, the older alphabet, the original runic alphabet. And the new rune that we're dealing with today, called Hagal or Hagalaz, is the letter H. It's pretty much identical to the English H, except that the bar in the middle goes on a diagonal and not just straight across. So this is the letter H. Here it is in my rune set, and it means hailstorm or hail. It's the hail was described as grains of ice by the ancient Northern Europeans, and they were said to be a crystallized piece of the heavens. And this ties into what the mystical interpretation of Hagal is. Some of you may have read books on, basic books on the runes, which will just talk about Hagal from a divinatory perspective as a sign of hardship. H is for hardship, right? That there's stuff that comes down hard and causes trouble. But then there can also be some good results that come after this, right? The ancient runes, the ancient rune poems, as it were, they talked about this, and I'm just trying to find there we go. The Anglo-Saxon rune poem said that hail is the whitest of grains. It comes from high in the heaven. Showers of wind hurl it, then it turns to water. So this is a sign of a mixed kind of situation, right? First, it comes from the heaven, right? It comes from high up, so you can't really complain about it in the sense that it's coming from, it's literally over your head. You can't do much about it, right? It gets hurled down by showers of winds, but then it turns into water, so there's a benefit that comes out of it, right? But then there's the esoteric understanding of Hagal. Hagal is the leading rune of the second 8. You might remember that the first 8 has as its first rune, see if I can find it here, the rune, I could just draw it again if not. Yeah, I'll just draw it. It has the rune Fehu. And the rune Fehu is the rune of cattle, the rune of prosperity, but it's also a rune of force, power. So here's Fehu up at the top, right? And if Fehu is the rune of power, then Hagal is the rune of structure, okay? And there's a reason for this. So Fehu is like force, and Hagal is form. Now we're at a different stage, right, in the unfolding of reality. We've gone from force to form. And the reason that Hagal is representative of this is, first of all, in its shape. You will notice that it is made of 2 pillars that have the one bar intersecting them, right? And 2 pillars is always symbolic of containing a boundary space, right? You see this in all kinds of cultures, that they are limit markers. They say from here, from point A to point B, right? But then they say, this is it. Outside of this, there's dragons, right? These are the limits of the kingdom, right? The ancient Egyptians would put a pole at one end and a pole at the other end of their kingdom and say, this is as far as our kingdom goes. Lots of other cultures did similar things. They're the boundary markers. And so Hagal is showing the boundary markers of the universe. And that those two boundary markers are connected, that there's a royal road that lets you from one to the other, right? You see similar things in the tarot, where you see that symbolisms of towers and two towers that appear in the moon card, for example, this is the idea that there is a narrow path in between these two extremes that lets you have movement, freedom of movement, right? And Hagal is also the 9th rune numerically, right? So it's rune number 9. And it is a symbol of the 9 points of the universe that is the tree of Yggdrasil, right? The tree of life in its version in the Norse tradition had 9 worlds, right? And this is the 9th rune. It is the rune that is connected to Odin as Har, the High One. Odin had many forms and names, right? H, Har, H is for high, right? So it's the highest. And so Hagal is a representation of the universe. But what it doesn't have is energy. It's locked in. And some clever writers have pointed out the connection between Hagal and the second rune, Uruz, which I've drawn a little bit smaller there. So Uruz is a rune of, you might remember from the video, of moving and returning, right? That you're coming up from the well of Weird, and then you come back down again after some struggle, after some movement across, right? But with Hagal, you have this connection to the higher that emerges from the points of movement. So there isn't only a return. There is something that locks, that crystallizes there, that traps the energy, that freezes the energy into a form that remains, that doesn't just all go away after. So this is about a solid state, a state that has structure, its total structure, but without motion. The motion has to come later. And this is why you have that symbolism in the Anglo-Saxon rune about how it comes down hard. It is grain made of the whitest of grains, right? But later it becomes water over time. You need something that is applied beyond. First, you need force to come out of it. Until that happens, until you generate force, then all you have is form. So the Hagal rune is representative of the universe, of the tree of life. It's thus, in symbolic terms, an equivalent to the in the Western Hermeticism to the 6-pointed star, the hexagram, and of course, the Hagal rune also has 6 points. So, what else shows you form, but has no movement of its own? Well, a map. Hagal is a map of the universe. It represents the layout of form and structure. Now, interestingly enough, in the younger Futhark. In the later version that was somewhat reduced in structure, you could say, of the runes, you get the H, the Hagal. It looks like this instead. It goes from being that to being this. But you can see that the concept is still there, maybe even more so. It's a six-pointed cross now. So it's very similar to the six-pointed star, right? It represents the points marking all the different points and boundaries of reality, of the universe. I think in a way the H sign has more, is less obvious maybe, but has more depth or room for consideration and contemplation in it. Right? The Hagel rune is, you could say, the pattern. It's where structure gets formed, but it's only like the blueprint. So before you're dealing with fundamental forces of life, and now you're dealing with fundamental structures of reality. But they don't actually become manifest in a dynamic way until later on, which you'll see in future videos in some of the other runes that come along in this aid. That's all for today.